Now, turning to our next speaker, I am delighted to present my fellow Kerryman, Tommy Heffernan. So I first encountered Tommy when we were both students together in the 1990s, and it would be nice to just reminisce about our experiences together in college at this point. But I went onto Tommy's website and I discovered some more relevant information, I suppose. And by the way, the website is www.tommythevet.ie, and it contains a lot of useful information on animal health, as well as containing a certain amount of useful information about Tommy. So Tommy graduated from the UCD Veterinary College in 2002. He spent several years as assistant and practice principal in County Wicklow. And during this time, he obtained a graduate certificate in dairy herd health from UCD and became a master cow signals trainer. He received a Newfield International Farming Scholarship in 2018, and he has also worked for 16 months as an animal health specialist with the Irish Farmers Journal, and also in various roles as a veterinary consultant. In 2020, Tommy began a new chapter by setting up his own consultancy company working with industry, vets and farmers. And Tommy is going to speak to us tonight about his experience of working on herd health issues in different farms. So Tommy, we can see you there, and are you okay to start your presentation, please?
Can you see my screen, Michael?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Thanks very much.
Good to go. And going down memory lane, Michael, you were very good to me back in the day. You were the year ahead of us. You shared a lot of information with us, even where the cheapest pint of Beamish was in Dublin, maybe the most valuable bit of information back then. Thanks very much to the team in the department for having me along this evening for my discussion and doing yourself a favour and getting on top of herd health. Just in the way of a little background, Michael sort of introduced me. I spent a lot of time in practice, 15.5 years, and I suppose as a younger vet, I spent a lot of time looking at the individual animal, and I suppose 10 or 12 years ago I recognised that herd-based approach really was where gains could be made at farm level, and I got really interested in nutrition, and that interest has gone back even further now to understanding soil and soil health. And I think I'm continually reminded as well, and the Minister alluded to it, and Michael alluded to it, the quality of protein, animal protein produced on our livestock farms, and that role in human health. We should never forget that. Inside the farm gate, I'm very, very interested in the whole area of immunity. I think it's a really fascinating subject, the microbiome and gut health. I think there'll be a lot of talk about that over the next decade. And I was very lucky in 2018 to do a Nuffield Farming Scholarship, where I looked at really trying to understand the cow again and the cow's role in the farming system and understanding the biology of the animal. And I have this concept of being brilliant at the basics, and a lot of it will be covered tonight. And I suppose as well that, you know, other speakers are going to talk about this, but healthy animals are more productive and profitable animals, but they're also, from an environmental, have less impact. I think this year has been dominated by a number of subjects that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but COVID-19 is on everyone's mind. And they say that crises will accelerate trends, and I think we'll see more focus on, certainly on the farm animal side, on the whole area of antibiotic resistance and the need to reduce antibiotics, and this idea of one health, where animals, humans, we all share the same environment. I'm involved in a project as well, just started, called Vision Farming, where we're looking at two farming systems that I'm involved in, 2 dairy farms under a number of pillars, and animal health is a very, very important one of them. I think without farmer sustainability, we're all at nothing really, and we're always trying to sustain and optimize people, but having primary producers that are profitable is absolutely essential in this conversation. And I think a focus on animal health will certainly deliver it. And I believe that an animal-centered approach is sort of what I go back to time and time again from my experience as a cow signals trainer, vet in practice, and during my consultancy work. So I suppose the first trend of the year, the thing that's dominated everything in all our lives, is it's been this small virus that's caused absolute destruction, not just in Ireland, but globally. And I think we, you know, there's very few positives, but I suppose from a farm perspective, we've all understood maybe, and from a veterinary perspective, how disease spreads. But the importance of, and maybe all of us have become epidemiologists, but the importance of knowledge and evenings like, and weeks like this week are really important, where we talk about animal health and sharing knowledge. You know, and I think there's a lot of lessons to come out of COVID-19. We've all understood about immunity, you know, these comorbidities. Immunity is a really important concept on farm as well. If we look at the BVD scheme, some people will criticize it, that it hasn't delivered as fast as it should, but overall it's been a fantastic scheme to take out one of the most, you know, immunosuppressive viruses in our national herd. We've seen a massive reduction, and we're seeing at a ground level the positive impacts of that. We're also learning about the economics of disease. We understand the impact of the economics of disease on farms. We're learning about hand hygiene. We can think about that from a farm perspective as well, with our young calves that are, immunocompromised. Maybe we look at mastitis and teat disinfection. We're looking at health in general, and we understand we're all valuing maybe our own health, but health is wealth on our farms as well. Healthy animals are profitable, productive animals. It was Doreen Carden on a recent panel made this analogy, and it was a brilliant one. This idea of social distancing. We can see that analogy played out maybe in our animals as they're housed, and particularly when we see issues with pneumonia and maybe mastitis where there's overcrowding in herds. Another thing we're looking at, and everyone's talking about, is vaccinations. We've been using vaccines on farms for years. The word vacca, the word vaccination, actually comes from the Latin word for cow. The first vaccine came from cowpox, which was used to inoculate people with smallpox. So the cow is a role back to the origins of vaccination. And we're learning about diagnostics as well. And all of these principles, when we talk about the health of the herd, can be applied on our farms. The second great trend of the year that consumed a lot of people was this one, and you can make up your own minds. But there's certainly an element of populism, and I'm very interested in the whole idea of leadership. But I think when we talk about animal health, it really must come to the top table now when we look at our farming systems of the future. There's so much to be gained out of a focus on animal health. So let's focus on disease. As a young vet, I looked at the individual animal where we did our clinical exam, and we were trying to find what the cause of the problem was and really focus on treatment. And then I realized that, when you see groups of animals with similar conditions, that the herd-based approach and the preventative approach was the second level up from the individual animal. Now, the individual animal and that treatment is always very important, but a herd-based approach is really where we're looking at a more broad range and a targeted approach to prevent disease. And then we have herd and disease at a national level. And again, it was alluded to at the start. We have several diseases, and I think the BVD scheme has been a really positive example of how controlling a disease can have a positive impact. We must do more on neonates. We have our IBR scheme. We're continuing with the challenge of TB. And I think Smallingberg was a very interesting disease when it appeared. And when I was in practice in Wicklow, we saw a huge amount of abortions in sheep and cattle, something we'd never seen before. So we must always be ready for that challenge of that unexpected or exotic disease. Thankfully, the like of blue tongue has stayed away from our shores, but we will see challenges like this. So there are the three levels of disease. When we talk about the cost of disease, because ultimately we talk about herd health, we look at disease and the cost of disease. And it's often in that conversation, it's in relation to maybe the call out from a vet or the injections or that might be administered. And I hope people have had their dinner, but pneumonia is a very good example of a disease that we look at, treating and getting the best treatment for. But we must remember that the great costs of a lot of our diseases on farm are loss of function. The lungs are this spongy alveolar tissue soaking up oxygen from air into the bloodstream, metabolically driving the animal. Chronic damage from pneumonia means chronic loss of performance. Lameness is another very good example where we look at treatments, but it's the loss of function. And if you look at the foot of the cow, this tiny 5 millimeter germinal layer at the very base of the sole, where the soft tissue, the sole of the foot grows from, encapsulated by this hard corium. Where you have chronic lameness, you have chronic pain, you have chronic welfare. It's probably one of the most costly diseases in our farms. And we look at mastitis and dairy farms. Our income comes from milk production, and we always think often about maybe the cost of the injection or discarded milk. It's certainly more so the cull cow or the loss of production, this alveolar milk tissue that's chronically damaged and destroyed from mastitis. So there's a real cost to disease. We look at lungworm, parasites, calf scour, another devastating disease that can occur in the springtime, both for the calves themselves and people managing. The last thing you want is an outbreak of scour when you're at your busiest time of year. So to me, the cost of disease, when we focus on disease, is really, yes, the treatments are important, but it's the loss of productive function in those animals that's really key. When I think about herd health, I look at it slightly different to herd performance. When I'm talking about infectious disease, and that can be included as parasites. And it's always about, I've really gone back to basics of understanding that when we look at infectious disease, we're thinking about two main things. We're thinking about immunity. If we have a healthy immune system, then that healthy immune system has more ability to fight infection. And that's one thing. So if we have something that's a suppressing immunity in an individual animal or at herd level. On the other side of the balance then is infection pressure, the amount of bugs or bacteria the immune system is exposed to. If we have an overwhelming amount of infection, then no immune system can cope with it. And it's always about balancing these two. So I think immunity is a really important concept to think about. And if we think about our cows and our herds, what impacts immunity? And I learned a long time ago that nutrition is one of the biggest drivers for an impact on immunity. And if we look at when we see most of our disease and seasonal systems, it's metritis, it's mastitis in the first 30 days. So nutrition has a massive impact on the cow, and particularly when she calves down, and I'll talk a little bit about it again. You know, she's under a negative energy pressure, her immune system is down. So focusing on nutrition is really important. When we look at health and we look at immunity, and we mentioned it with COVID-19, vaccination plays a key role in stimulating immunity in healthy animals at key times of the year. Parasites are another growing challenge for us on farms. I'm increasingly worried about the things I'm seeing on farm in relation to resistance. So, you know, I see a lot of lungworm in dairy cows over the summer months, often causing problems on their own or opening the door to other viruses. The weather can impact immunity. One of the big lessons I did from traveling the world doing my Nuffield scholarship was the impact that people have on livestock. How we handle and work with cattle can have a huge impact on their performance. If we think about the cow, she's a slow-moving, gregarious, precocious species. You know, she moves at 2.5 to 3 kilometers an hour. If we put pressure and stress on cows, that will ultimately lead to immunity issues. And the big one for cows is the environment. And this was probably a game-changing time in my career when I went and I did my cow signals training, and I really started understanding the cow again. And particularly from an Irish perspective, we have so many advantages in a grass-based system. But typically we're calving our cows, we're lambing our ewes indoors. So the environment that she calves down in, that she dries off and works through the winter in, is really important. And getting the simple things right, like space, feed space, water, rest, comfort, all those things, fresh air, are really important. If I look on the other side of the scale, infection pressure, the amount of bugs or bacteria that challenge our animals. And this is where we start off with talking about biosecurity. So we talk about open and closed herds. The biggest risk for any farm is brought in disease brought in by animals, carrying respiratory infections, carrying maybe infections in their feet. It's a really important area to look at on our farms. Health and vaccination. Vaccinations, again, on the flip side of infection pressure, they help the immune system at key times of the year when infection pressure goes up. We think about housing as a key time. If we think about right now the use of maybe scour vaccines to help with calves. So it's about really understanding that when and where vaccines are used. Parasites also cause issues around infection pressure. The weather itself, typically in Ireland we've damp, mild winters on silage diets, creating a kind of an environment indoors that bacteria love. If we think about our own role in infection pressure, if we're milking cows and we're thinking about clinical mastitis and good teat preparation, if we think about our calves and administering colostrum, all those simple things. The environment, so right now on our farms, cows are going indoors, running scrapers, making sure ventilation is correct, having adequate space, that all helps. I think we've alluded to, maybe it was mentioned by the Minister, some of the challenges coming outside the farm gate. Antibiotic reduction is a big one with our new legislation in 2022. And there'll be an increased focus on AMR. I think it's very important. I don't think with a focus on herd health, and remember, antibiotics are often part of the cure. They're part of the treatment for the cost. Prevention really makes sense. We also have the challenge of welfare, with consumers and society increasingly talking about animal welfare. But I think good health, good welfare, they're all linked together. And again, we have our environmental challenges. I suppose the topic for another evening is farming potentially with all these challenges getting more complicated? And who pays for all these complications and challenges? But when it comes to herd health, I think there's a real return on investment in profitability. Remember, disease is a cost. Prevention beats cure. And we can still reduce our antibiotic usage, but we can still deliver the results on farm. I think when I talk about farmer sustainability at the start, a good emphasis on herd health can really deliver, because healthy animals are more productive animals. That means more profitable animals, and they have that reduced environmental impact from efficiency. We have a huge advantage in seasonal systems. Some challenges around maybe the workload at certain times of the year. But it was a few years ago, I drew a circle on a page when I was trying to figure this out for the first time. And I realized that a proactive approach meant I could do things at housing that was going to impact the dry period in calving. if we look at some of the things we can do during the dry period, it's going to impact the cow, how she calves down, looking ahead at calving pins and hygiene, looking at preparing for calving. Equally so around calving, the most difficult time for the cow, that's an impact on cows going towards breeding time. So in a cyclical system like our seasonal systems, a proactive approach works really, really well. And again, looking at grazing and parasite management, the use of fecal egg counts, and maybe a more, and these plans tend to be tailored. And within that cycle, each year a new cycle begins where our calves are born and they begin their productive life cycle, looking at their waiting 2 years until they enter the cycle again. So in seasonal systems, we have an opportunity to be really proactive in advance, and it takes planning. So right now, to give you just an example of the type of approach I'd be talking about, I've done lots of herd health programs, and I've gone back to very simple ways of just risk assessments on farm. Identify things that are working well, identify areas that are at risk. Looking at the key things at this time of year. So your body condition score will tell you so much about the nutritional performance of the cow. We know where she needs to be. We know where the herd needs to be. What are cows telling us themselves? What's their dung telling us? What are they lame? It's a great time now as cows go indoors and during the dry period, particularly in dairy farms, to stop and control parasites. You know, are we using diagnostics like bulk milk samples? All this information feeds into a plan. If we think about milk quality on farm, and I know farmers will be very aware of the conversation about selective dry cow therapy. You know, it's a great time to look at your drying off cows, making decisions about treatment worthiness for maybe some high cell count cows, deciding what tubes to use, what cows might not need a tube, and that focus on hygiene for the cow after the risk period. The housing itself, looking at the things like space, water, bedding, moisture buildup, the exact conditions the bacteria like. How can we minimize that down? Looking at feeding and supplementation, looking at vaccination strategies in the dry period that will help the cow and maybe calf if it's a scour vaccine, and focusing on key minerals. So every farm can do this. You can work out your bottlenecks. Where are your challenges? We need to do some management. We need to look at the data. But every farmer will think back to 2019, and he or she will be able to say, I've had milk fever issues, I've had clinical mastitis issues, I've had calf pneumonia issues. Maybe that's a simple place to start. How can I be proactive right now to reduce that? There's lots of data already available through the like of our cell chip program when it comes to mastitis. And a very simple benchmark that I often use when I look at going onto farms is as I see where is the antibiotic usage. Is there a lot of antibiotics being used to treat calves? Is there a lot of antibiotics being used to treat infectious lameness? And that will give us indications. And I suppose it's about working out what can be done in the short term and also having a view for the long term. One of the things that I'm very conscious of is in a seasonal system is we have a lot happening at the one time. And the biggest challenge for our cows, and this is a dairy cow, but it could equally be said for your beef cow calving in the springtime, is that calving itself is a huge metabolic challenge. The cow herself is going through the physiological process of calving. She's starting to produce milk, she's starting to produce colostrum. She can't consume enough energy to meet that milk demand. She goes into a negative energy. It's an immune stress. So if we can focus on energy management and calcium and milk fever management in our herds, getting minerals right at this time, it allows the cow to really set off on a lactation as best as she can. Like the dry period, I see the dry period as the pre-season to the match, to the actual season or the game itself. So we must understand that at an individual cow level, and then we must think about the herd. And again, it's back to those challenges around space, particularly if we look at heifers. It's something I'm seeing consistently, particularly we're seeing herds growing. Heifers coming into a herd, maybe calving down with high cell counts on their first recording, you know, just under more stress. So if we think about and understand the challenges around transitioning, we can really have the best start to the year. So some examples around some of the issues that maybe I've seen the last couple of weeks, and certainly I've seen a spike in lameness over the last month on farms. And again, it's about what can you do in the short term or the long term. So we was on a farm and we 30% lameness and mobility scoring. So there was a huge lameness issue. So when we got in and we lifted feet, we saw there was lots of issues around mechanical lameness, which is your white line, your sole ulcers, and also Mortellaro infectious lameness. So it was about deciding treatment decisions, and actually the hoof trimmer on the farm was going to train the farm team to actually make better, quicker interventions themselves. But the biggest challenge was probably the mechanical lameness. And when you looked at the roadways and looked at the cows, they were telling their own story. And it really, for that farm, the biggest investment that we made this year ahead was in roadways in January. Really, these simple things, now that might seem like a cost, but it's about understanding what we can do in the short term and the long term. I do a lot of work with mastitis as well. Again, you know, we've seen huge advances in our national cell count coming under control, but we've seen a spike in clinical mastitis. We've a lot of data on when we engage with milk records. We must remember, you know, getting some idea of what bugs are on farm, working with your vet around treatment decisions and seeing what's working and what's not. And I think that's a very important process, to look at our treatments and review them regularly to see if we're getting the results we should be getting. And again, even in mastitis, I talk about immunity and infection pressure. I talk about the 1, 2, 3 of clinical mastitis. So this year, I would have seen a lot of clinical mastitis in herds. And I tell people to go back to the basics of understanding what happens when we see clinical mastitis. We see bacteria entering through that mechanical defense mechanism in the teat. We see an immune reaction, and depending on the level of immune reaction, it can be changes in milk to the change in the udder to very sick cows, particularly freshly calved cows. So we need to look at 3 areas when you're seeing a spike in clinical mastitis. Number 1, has infection pressure gone up? Are we seeing more bacteria in the environment? Are we seeing more challenges there? And typically what I've seen in the last 3 or 4 weeks is cows have been housed, spikes in clinical mastitis. The second thing we need to look at is the teat itself, that mechanical defense mechanism. At herd level, is the milking machine doing damage to that? And particularly maybe even more so when we think about our freshly calved cow and the role of low blood calcium and milk fever. Could that be causing issues? And the third thing I'll say to farmers is look at the immunity, particularly if you're seeing a spike at herd level. So this year I've seen 3 or 4 trends. A lot of clinical mastitis in freshly calved cows where there was milk fever. A lot of clinical mastitis during breeding time where cows were in heat, and often when they were in peak milk production. And again, when there was other incidences on the farm, like maybe lungworm issues. And finally, when cows came into houses this year, we've seen a spike. So for me, mastitis is about identifying these risks and really applying consistent routines. There's been a lot of pneumonia at the back end of the year as well. A lot of issues with first graders pneumonia. Again, it's about that proactive approach. If you're continuously seeing issues with pneumonia, and again, I hope you have had your dinner, but looking at this type of postmortem and looking at this tissue here, this top tissue is the healthy tissue. So you can see the damage that's been done. So it's about prevention all the time. What symptoms are we seeing? Are the animals got snotty noses? Have they got clear discharges? Is there a cough? What bugs are present? You know, parasites and lungworm at the tail end of the year continue to cause problems. You working with your vet around diagnostics, nasal swabs, lung washes if needed. And again with immunity, go back to again with pneumonia, go back to immunity. Understand the impact of stress, feeding, other challenges, weaning. And then vaccination is somewhere we can really make an impact here. Again, if we know the bugs, more specific vaccination, but vaccination works in advance of the risk period. And if you're seeing a lot of pneumonia in the houses, in-house and particularly in calves, really assessing housing, because fresh air plays such a key role as a natural disinfectant as part of the story. Again, I'm nearly there now, but calf scour is another one we see year on year. And again, I've done a lot of work on calf health, and I've brought it back to the 6 pillars if I'm ever looking at this. It's colostrum. People are sick of hearing the story about colostrum, but I think we do still need to make improvements, particularly when we're harvesting and handling colostrum around hygiene. We need to look at feeding calves, remembering they can drink 8 to 10 litres, remembering that it's going to be cold in January and February. Are we feeding calves enough? Looking at hygiene in our overall calf system, remembering a calf is born without immunity and requires colostrum to get that passive immunity. So that focus on hygiene and routines. Fresh air. Fresh air is a very important thing, but can be a difficult thing to manage in calf houses. Comfort. The calves are in warm, dry straw. And again, space. We're remembering space. When are we seeing coronavirus spreading? Where we have people packed into maybe rooms or events where there's poor airflow. Again, the same applies for calves when we're seeing disease issues. And so it's putting structure around these. So the last case is just a case I was out with last week. And typically, like so many farms, a very efficient farm working really well, but just this niggling issue of Cryptosporidium scour. And, you know, going onto the farm, it was so hard at a top level to see issues. But I suppose if we understand the way calf scours spread, and understand that particularly in seasonal systems, and the like of Cryptosporidium, it only takes one of, or a couple of hundred of these oocysts to be ingested, and billions and millions of these can be produced. And you can imagine in a seasonal system, the build-up of what I referred to earlier on as infection pressure. And that's why we see scour issues towards the middle and end of calving. You know, when we have issues around immunity thrown in with that type of build-up, we can really see issues. So on that farm, you know, it was only small changes over a couple of areas. It was looking at the dry cows to see how they were being managed, how they were being fed, maybe to improve colostrum quality close up calving. Particularly with colostrum harvesting, it was an area that wasn't focused on before. But again, looking at how colostrum was harvested, particularly with how long colostrum was left in buckets, and maybe more attention to detail and hygiene. A little bit more feeding on that farm was probably going to make an impact. And just small things like extra channels and increasing drainage were all going to help, along with some preventative procedures. So I hope I've captured some of the messages that I wanted to do, that herd health really, we're learning about it at a global level. And I think, you know, populism is dangerous and leadership is hard, but animal health does need to come to the top table on our farms. We must understand that disease is a cost. It's the loss of function, the reduced production and performance, the issues of welfare. So prevention really matters really pays over cure. And in seasonal systems, we have a massive opportunity to employ herd health as part of better performance. So that's it. That's me wrapped up, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Tommy, for that very interesting presentation.